Simon says subscribe and click on the bell icon to receive notifications.
In this lesson, we're going to get a little bit deeper into working with images in InDesign. Now, when you bring in images, just a little reminder, InDesign brings them in with two different properties within the image. One property is going to be the frame that goes around the image. So think about a frame like we would in real life, where you have a frame around a picture, and then you have the image that's actually in the frame. Now the frame can have a multiple variety of different uses. It frames it, but it can also crop things around, but it also acts as a container. So if I simply just click on it here, you will notice here I have my frame around it. As you can see, this little blue frame. The blue frame around this is actually showing us the inset for a text wrap. So this is actually giving us a little bit of space there. And we're going to talk about that in future lessons. But what's nice about this, very simply, is I can go ahead and click and drag this, and then notice the entire thing moves, both the frame and the image. Okay? Now, what do I mean by the image? I know that sounds really odd, but let me just show you what I mean. If I go ahead and just click in the center, and by the way, most of you should actually have a little donut kind of circle in here. My screen recording software does not show that when I'm recording, but most of you should actually have a little donut in there. If you don't have that, you can always go to View, and you go to Extras, and you're going to see it's called the Content Grabber. Okay, but I'm going to show it to you as if it's there. You can see a little hand pops up, and when I click on that, that's what it's referring to as content. It's the image that lives inside of the frame. So you'll notice that my image is a different color in terms of what bounding box I show. So let me do that again. I click anywhere but that center part. I get this blue frame. I come in the center and I get the image. Now, when is that going to be beneficial for me? Well, I may want to move my image inside of the frame. So I'm just going to go ahead and just simply click and drag, and you'll notice there's my image, and I want to get a little more of the grapes. Great, and you can see I can do that. Right? But let's say I want to see less of like this bottom part down there. I would then manipulate the frame. So I click on that, and then all I'm going to do is essentially mask this out. So the frame is going to be a little bit smaller, and you can see I've just cropped that out. Okay, so all I'm doing is just resizing the frame. So again, think about it how you would like a frame inside of your house. All right, so very simply moving our images around, and then also selecting the image within the frame to then just move the image right there. Okay, so pretty simple, hopefully pretty straightforward. All right, now earlier we talked about ways that we can resize our images. So a quick review on that. I can use the auto fit option that's right up here, and then when I click and drag from the corner, it constrains the proportions, and what does it do? It also changes both the frame and the image at the same time. If that's not selected, it'll only just do the frame. Okay. The other way you can do it is with Control and Shift on my keyboard. You can see that. I can do that same thing. I'll go ahead and do it the opposite way. Very good. Super happy. Okay. Now let's talk about how we can bring images in. So I'm going to bring it in to our Fabio's Flavors here. I'll actually go to my blank one here, my Fabio's Flavors, my poster we started. And I changed this from Fabio's Flowers to Fabio's Flavors because in a little bit we're going to make a poster about how we can actually work with some food pictures. All right, so how do we bring them in? We just simply go from here to File and then Place, and then we can bring them in. Now, I don't want to review this because I want to show you something a little bit different, because this time I'm going to show you how you can bring in an image inside of a frame that already exists. Okay, because sometimes you just want to have a little layout of how you want all your images to be presented. So now we're going to be introduced to something a little bit different called our frames. So if you right click on that, you're going to see we have our rectangle frame, an ellipse frame, and also our polygon frames. Very similar to what we did with our shapes, but this time they're going to be frames. All right, so I'm just going to do a very simple square. So I'm holding down the Shift key, and I'm going to turn everything back on by hitting the W key so you can see what a frame looks like. It's going to have a little X in there. All right, now I want to have an image live inside of that frame. So very simply, all I'm going to do is go over here to File, and I'm going to say Place, and then when I place an image in there, it's going to go inside of the frame. So I've already decided that I want to have a square image. I've already decided where it's going to go. So this helps me do my planning. All right, so let's just go ahead and bring in like this, maybe picture of the food. And I do that, and it's just going to pop right inside there. Okay, now the benefit of this is that I know it's going to be a square. And then because I'm working with an image and a frame separately, I can then go ahead and select this in there. And I'm just going to nudge this over and then have that nice and centered just like that. Okay, and by the way, you can use your keyboard, little nudge right there, using my arrow keys to go left and right if you like as well. And that looks pretty good. Now, also note that just like a shape, I can put a stroke around this if I want to as well. Okay, so I'm going to come back over to here, and I'm just going to increase the points for that, and I'm going to change that stroke color to a different stroke color right there. And I'm just going to go ahead and say OK. I click away, and now if I hit the W key again, I'm going to turn that off, and now very good, I have an image with a stroke around it. Okay, because I've established that frame, I'm already set to go with that. Okay, so really nice to be able to kind of create ahead of time how you want your layout to be. Let's just do that one more time, but let's do it with a circle frame this time. So I'm going to say ellipse frame tool, and I'm just going to hold down the shift key. And once again, I'm going to go ahead and deselect it and then just turn everything on with the W key. And you can see this is a frame, right? Making the distinction between a frame and a regular shape. Very important to understand that. So I'm going to go back to File. I'm going to say Place. And let's bring in another image of maybe some food if I can find it. Let's go back to Italy. And there should be some nice, delicious items in there. All right, let's bring in another picture of some pasta. And you can see how that fits in so nicely. Okay, now this may not always be the case. So I want to talk about something a little bit different when your items do not fit perfectly inside of your frame, but you still want to establish a way to make them fit. Okay, so let's discuss that, because when we're bringing in images, we may already have a preset layout, but our dimensions of our images may not fit perfectly. All right, so let's just go ahead and I'm just going to draw out another frame, and I'm just going to say, okay, here's my rectangle frame tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and just bring this out like that, for example. All right, and there you have it. And I'm going to bring in an image, so I'm going to say File, and then Place. And let's just find another picture, and let's just have a nice little picture of there. Okay, and now this is looking okay, but it's not exactly what I want it to be. So I want to introduce you to our fitting options. All right, so you can get your fitting options in a variety of different ways. Number one is going to be inside of the Properties panel, and you're going to see that there's this whole group here called Frame Fitting. And you can move your mouse over them. It'll tell you exactly what it does. Fit content proportionally, fit content to frame, fit frame to content. So essentially, what is the winner? Is the winner going to be the content? That's going to be the determinant of what you want your content to look like. Or is the frame the right thing and we want everything to conform to what the frame looks like? Okay. The other way you can do it is by simply right-clicking, and then if you go to fitting, notice it's a little bit more spelled out. And of course, you have a bunch of keyboard shortcuts as well. This is entirely up to you. I actually prefer this way because it's already showing me what the tools are. It's already spelled out. So let's just see what these do. So I'm going to just tinker with these right here. I have my fit frame to content, fit content to frame, and also content aware fit. Okay, so we'll play around with some of these. So let's just try fit the frame to the content. So in this case, the content is sort of the winner of the tug of war. I choose that, and then notice how the frame then conformed to what the image's original dimensions are. So let me go ahead and undo that. Let's do that one more time. And this time I'm going to say fit the content to the frame. All right, and you can see now, it now just kind of shrunk it, so it fit the image perfectly inside there. Okay, but you may find sometimes that the image gets a little bit kind of distorted. So we have to be aware of that. Now, we don't necessarily always have to be aware of it because there is this content aware fit that InDesign is going to use its sort of artificial intelligence to identify what's going to be a good fit within the frame for the image without contorting it, okay, but also giving you as much of the image as possible. Let's go ahead and choose that. And you can see, great, nice job. And of course, I can come over to here and I can nudge this up a tiny bit. And that's ideal. So when you're bringing in an image, you just want to make sure you're aware of what the distortion looks like, what the dimensions look like, and in case it doesn't fit into the frame, no problem. Your fitting options are going to really help save you. Okay? So go ahead and practice that. We're going to come back. We're going to do a little bit more on images, and we're also going to talk about working with our links panel briefly so we understand what things are and where things are. Okay? Pause the video, practice, and we'll see you in the next lesson. In this lesson, we're going to go a little bit deeper into our image discussion so we have an opportunity to be a little bit more creative and have more opportunities to kind of nuance our images a little bit more. So I'm looking at this image that I brought in, and I brought it into this perfect square frame. But my client comes over and says, you know what, this might look nicer in a round circle frame. Well, I know how to do that from scratch, but I don't want to have to do that all over again because I like the placement of it, and I'm just going to waste some time if I have to do that all over again. Well, the good news is that InDesign has a really nice function to be able to convert your frame into a different shape. And by the way, if you're working with shapes, it's the same process. So let's go ahead and convert this into a circle. Well, how do I do that? Two ways I can. So I'm going to simply choose my image, and then I'm going to go way up here to my object menu. Okay, so I click on that, and then way down on the bottom is this convert shape. And I can convert that shape, which is now a square, into any one of these shapes here. Okay, so very simply, I'm just going to choose ellipse, and you'll see, just like that, it is now a perfect circle. All right, and that actually looks pretty neat. I like that. And of course, like I said in the last lesson, I can put a stroke around this. I can move it around however I want to. We're going to learn about text wrapping, but you see how nice and easy that is. Let me go ahead and undo that. I'm going to show you the other way you can do this that you might prefer. So again, I select the image. This time I'm going to come over here to my properties panel, and I'm going to click and drag down on this scroll bar, and I want you to notice there's this quick actions section, and there's a lot of things that you may prefer to use at some point. But what we're going to choose is convert shape, and guess what? The same choices appear here. So we don't have to remember as much because maybe going to that object menu might be like, oh my, where do I go again? There's so many menu options there. If I go to properties, you'll see I have all these choices right here. And now let's go ahead and just try a different one. Let's go over here to rounded rectangle. And you can see very subtly, I'll go ahead and zoom in on that for you. You can see now I have this little rounded rectangle around that. And we're going to talk about that in just a second. But I want you to really understand how easy it is to convert the shape. Okay, so let's go ahead and just maybe take a look at another image. And I'm going to do maybe something similar to this one, and working with what's called my corner radiuses, right, or corner radii, and that's what our rounded corners are, because that could actually add on a little bit of kind of visual interest for people. Let me just go ahead and just clean up my frames before I do that, so nice and airtight. So what do I wanting to do? I want to actually make a rounded corner along the outside there. Well, how do I do it in a slightly different way than converting the shape? Well, I want you to notice inside of my properties panel, I have this section right there called corner. And then notice my corner is this hard 90-degree corner. Well, guess what? Very simply, I can choose all kinds of different corners to add on some more visual interest around my image. So let's just choose a really simple one. Let's go to rounded. And you can see very subtly I have a rounded corner, but maybe it's too subtle. So let's bump that up. Come over to here. All right, just wait for it, and there it is, and that looks pretty neat. Maybe that's the style you're looking for. Let's try a different one. Come back over to here, and let's try fancy. See what that does. Maybe that's the look you're looking for. And again, if you're working with a shape, it's going to be the same process. Let's try bevel. That might actually work nicely for what we're trying to communicate, something about Europe. Maybe that's in line with your aesthetic. Try inset, and you'll notice that the same thing applies if I want to change the parameters of that. So maybe I don't want too much of an inset. I can then play around with it that way. Okay, so really, really nice. But let's just go ahead and go back to my rounded. And this time what I'm going to do is I want you to play around with this guy right there. Click to edit the corners. So when I choose that, I want you to notice how this is actually going to give me a little bit more flexibility and possibly a little bit more sort of tactile control over how I'm going to manipulate this. So now I get these 4 diamonds. I'm going to click and drag just like that. And then maybe I want to make it kind of like a pillbox shape, something like that. And I can do that. All right, so it's a little more of a kind of a capsule, if you will. Let's go ahead and bring this back. And notice how all 4 of them get manipulated. But let's say I wanted to only manipulate 1 or 2 of them. I want to isolate the corners. So let's make sure this is selected. And I'm going to make sure again that I have my 4 diamonds there. What I'm going to do this time is I'm going to hold down the Shift key as I click and drag on the diamond. So I want to make this so it has a hard 90-degree corner and not this corner radius up on top. So I hold down the Shift key and I click and drag going this way, and notice how that's isolated. Just like that, click and drag that, going this direction, and now that's isolated. And now you can see I have a very different look and feel for my image and my corners. All right, so really nice we can do that. And the last thing I want to show you is you can always come over to this little corner section and notice how this is underlined. It's underlined telling me that I can actually click on it. And when I do that, you're going to see it allows me to then pretty much do a lot of what I just did in terms of adjusting each individual corner, upper left, lower right, etc. And then I can make it so it's just going to do them independently however I want to. So just keep in mind you can either link them all together or unlink them, and then they will do them independently, or they'll do them all collectively, depending on what you want to do. So this is going to be unlinking them, and then if I want to make this one kind of grow a little bit more, it's going to be separate from the rest of them. Maybe if I choose the preview button, and you can see this will then increase or decrease what that's going to look like. All right, so up to you. I'm going to go ahead and cancel that. Okay, so really nice you can work with that. All right, now the last thing I want to talk about here is working with our display options. Okay, so if I come down to, let's just say, this image right here, I know that this is a high quality image, but it's not coming forth as such. So what's going on here, right? It looks a little bit jagged and such, but I know it's actually a really good image. So what's actually happening here? Well, InDesign is trying to save my processing power by saying, hey, you know what? We're not going to show you the whole image because it's a very, very big file and your computer can only handle so much. So we're just going to give you sort of like, the facade of what this image is. But if I right click on this, I want you to notice there's this display performance. And notice it's typical display, and that's going back to where my preferences are. And at the end of this whole course, we're going to learn how we can manipulate it on a application level. But what I'm going to choose now is, instead of typical display, I'm going to choose high display, high quality display. Now, fast display, if your computer keeps crashing, you get a lot of really, really high resolution images, you may want to just say fast display. I know what it looks like. Eventually, when you print it out or when you publish it, it'll be totally fine. But for the time being, you only want to display it very quickly. But I'm going to go ahead and choose high quality display, and you'll notice what it did there. Much cleaner edges there, and this is actually how the image looks. So I'm able to change that right there on the fly for this particular image. Maybe I'm showing it to a client who's peeking over my shoulder. They say, hey, how come my images aren't coming through? I can very easily right click and go to display performance. Okay, very good. So now let's go ahead and pause the video, practice this, do some of these great tools, converting our shapes and doing all this good stuff. And then after this, we're going to do a quick little lesson on working with the links panel. All right, and we'll see you soon.
If you're not a subscriber, click down below to subscribe so you get notified about similar videos we upload. To see the full course that this video came from, click over there. And click over there to see more videos from Simon Says It.